Welcome. I am so excited to have you here for this explainer. We're going to take a really structured, analytical look at an absolutely fascinating concept drawn straight from Vedic astrology. We're looking ahead to the year 2026. Now, whether you follow astrological cycles super closely or, you're just curious about macro trends in human consciousness, the source material we're unpacking today offers an incredibly compelling framework. It actually suggests that 2026 isn't just another year on the calendar. Instead, it's the trigger for something called symbolic human speciation. I know, it kind of sounds like science fiction, right? But the way this system breaks down the energies is just so systematic. So let's jump right in and see exactly how this source maps out our future.
Okay, let's dive into this. If you look at this exact quote we pulled from the source material, it immediately clears up what's meant by speciation. Because, when we normally hear that word, we immediately think of biology, right? Darwin, evolution, physical changes in a species over millions of years. But the text is explicitly clear here. It is not biological, it is not genetic, it is not physical, it is vibrational. So this isn't about humanity suddenly, growing a second brain or a new set of eyes. What this reading is actually describing is a profound separation of frequencies and states of consciousness. It's basically a massive energetic fork in the road.
And that brings us straight to our core definition. Symbolic human speciation is described as the division of humanity into two completely distinct trajectories of consciousness. It's a vibrational selection. According to the texts, this is considered literally the single most powerful reading that Vedic astrology offers for the year 2026. It's this massive, overarching theme that doesn't just predict events, but actually predicts a shift in how different groups of people will fundamentally experience reality itself. And to understand how this supposedly happens, the source material deconstructs this vibrational shift into four key astrological pillars. We're going to walk through each of these four triggers systematically to see exactly how this division is constructed.
So, pillar number 1, Saturn and the dissolution of identities. In the Vedic system, Saturn represents rigid structure, time, and karma. So the absolutely crucial point here is what happens when this intense planet of structure meets the boundless, watery energy of Meena, or Pisces. The symbolic effects are massive. We're talking about the collapse of obsolete collective identities and the end of rigid mental structures. Plus, it brings an overall increase in psychic sensitivity. But here's the real mechanism of the split. Saturn in Meena creates a really strict separation between those who allow their old identities to just dissolve and those who desperately resist the change. This first axis basically forces a fundamental choice upon humanity. Do you let yourself be transformed by this dissolution, or do you become rigid and just double down in resistance?
That brings us right to our second pillar, Rahu and Ketu marking the split.
In Vedic astrology, Rahu and Ketu are the lunar nodes. They're these shadow planets that govern our evolutionary path. And this placement perfectly illustrates how their 2026 position functions as an exact symbol of a road splitting in two. On one side, we have Rahu in Meena, the north node in Pisces. The text tells us this placement amplifies intuition, imagination, altered states, and spiritual awakening. It's this hugely expansive, boundary-dissolving energy. But then, on the exact opposite side, we have Ketu in Kanya, the south node in Virgo. And this energy actively cuts away the analytical mind, the need for intense control, and obsessive routine. The collective effect here is pretty stark. One part of humanity embraces expanded consciousness and subtle states, while another part, totally terrified by the loss of control and analytical certainty, experiences a contracted consciousness. They basically retreat into hyper-rationality and fear.
Now we layer in the third line of this speciation, eclipses and karmic cycles.
Eclipses always occur on that Rahu-Ketu axis we were just talking about, and the texts really highlight the 2026 eclipses as some of the most radically transformative events in recent years. Their symbolic impacts are incredibly specific. Basically, these eclipses act like cosmic scissors. They're described as cutting ancient karmic ties while simultaneously opening entirely new inner timelines. It acts as this massive energetic sorting mechanism. It literally separates those who are internally ready to step onto a new timeline from those who just aren't. So again, we see this recurring theme of division, right? Between individuals prepared to shift their inner reality and release the past, and those who remain anchored, stuck repeating the exact same old karmic patterns.
Finally, we reach the fourth pillar, the collective dasha, which signifies a new cycle.
Now, for some quick context, a dasha is a planetary period that rules over a specific phase of life. And while there's no single dasha for all of humanity, global planetary cycles in 2026 converge to create a truly massive energetic shift. The mechanics of this happen in two steps.
Step 1 is the definitive closure of a long Saturnian cycle, a cycle totally defined by heavy karma, restriction, and hard lessons. Then, Step 2 is the opening of a new Jupiterian cycle. But interestingly, the text notes this is a much more analytical and selective Jupiter cycle. It's not just blind expansion, it's very discerning. This massive planetary changing of the guard is exactly what the source claims creates a profound, undeniable energetic fracture across the entire human population. Let's move on and see how this builds into the final concept of this fourth pillar. This energetic fracture basically means individuals will be sorted into two totally different cyclical experiences. One group enters a cycle of expansion. They're growing, elevating, and moving outward and upward in their consciousness. The other group, however, is pulled into a cycle of contraction. The text actually refers to this as densification, becoming heavier, more material, and much more restricted.
And when you synthesize all four of these highly specific astrological triggers, it leads us to the climax of this reading, the emergence of the two new humanities.
Now, what's really interesting here is how starkly this defines the two resulting groups. Remember, we have the dissolution of Saturn, the intuitive split of the nodes, and the karmic reset of the eclipses. On one hand, we have humanity A, which is characterized by an ascending frequency. This group is described as more intuitive, perceptive, and sensitive. Crucially, they're more independent from external systems and heavily oriented toward inner consciousness. On the other hand, we have humanity B, defined by a descending frequency. The text describes this trajectory as far more controlled, deeply materialistic, heavily dependent on systems, highly reactive, and ultimately, bound by fear. So we're looking at two populations existing on the exact same planet, but operating on entirely different vibrational operating systems.
Which brings us to the ultimate conclusion of this entire astrological framework. The true Vedic speciation isn't just that these two groups happen to exist side by side, it's that they become two states of consciousness that literally no longer speak to each other. Because their vibrational frequencies, their core values, and their fundamental perceptions of reality become so wildly divergent, meaningful communication between humanity A and humanity B just breaks down completely. It's like they inhabit the exact same physical space, but live in entirely different energetic worlds.
It's a fascinating, complex, and honestly pretty intense way to look at the near future through the lens of ancient astrological systems. It frames 2026 not as a year of some external apocalypse, but as a year of profound, invisible internal selection. It really all comes down to how one responds to these dissolving, shifting energies. So based on the framework we've just unpacked together in this explainer, it leaves us with one unavoidable question to ponder. As these energies unfold, which trajectory of consciousness will you choose?